So this is going to be a practice round of me giving this presentation on the Thema Mundi, unless it's good, in which case this will just be the video I publish. But yeah, so this is going to be my first Friday video, and so every other Friday I'll do an astrology / me talking video. I think most of the time it's just going to be me talking about astrology, so I'm going to call them astrology videos. And then every other Sunday will be my alphabet series. And yeah, I have been avoiding it for long enough, making my video on avoidance. But yeah, that'll come out next week. This will be my first astrology video, and it's on the Thema Mundi. And I think the Thema Mundi is one of the most important things and one of the best teaching tools in astrology. Yeah, if you've never heard of the Thema Mundi, it's about to blow your fucking mind. Maybe not, but I hope so. So yeah, this is going to be my presentation on the Thema Mundi. Okay, there we go. Okay, so what is the Thema Mundi? So, that's the Latin name, I believe, and it means the world's theme or scheme. It's the birth chart of the world. And I don't think it's a real thing, it's a mythical thing. I mean, I'm sure it happened at one point, and I think it's going to happen again in 5,000 years. But basically, it's a chart where each of the 7 traditional planets are in their home sign with the ascendant in Cancer. Yeah, it's a really good teaching tool, even if it's not a real birth chart that was actually cast. We can still use it to learn a lot, and it's a good memorization tool, I feel like. Yes, but it's really good for teaching the domicile, or where a planet is at home. If you've ever heard of a planet ruling over a sign, that's what I'm talking about. And then it's also good at teaching aspects, and so that's how I'm going to break it up. So the first thing, so this is the Thema Mundi over here, and sometimes you'll see it with these planets at 15 degrees of their respective signs. But it's not super important. It's just important to know that each of these planets resides in these signs. Yeah, so Cancer has its home, or no, the moon has its home in Cancer, and the sun has its home in Leo. And then Mercury has its home in Virgo. Venus has its home in Libra. Mars has its home in Scorpio. Jupiter in Sagittarius. And then Saturn in Capricorn. And you'll notice some of these signs are left blank. And that's because a planet can't exist, can't be in 2 spots at once. So this supposed birth chart was when these planets were actually in their home signs. But we'll see in the next image that these planets sort of get reflected over the luminaries, the sun, the moon and the sun, into their other home. So yeah, let's move to here, domicile. So yeah, you'll hear the word domicile, you'll hear the word rulership, or home sign. Those all mean the same thing. So a planet is comfortable, is at home in 1 or 2 signs. So for the luminaries, the sun and the moon, they each only have 1 home. And I like to say that's because the sun and the moon are sort of, reflections of one another. I mean, the moon is a reflection of the sun's light. And that's why they both have the same planet opposing them. But I'll get into that when I get to the aspects. But as you can see, if we look at the other side of the luminaries, so on either side of the luminary we have Mercury, because Mercury is the first planet from the sun, and from the moon, I guess, from our perspective. And then we have Venus. So, well, actually, let me go back. Mercury Mercury rules. I'm tripping over my words here. So Mercury is at home in Virgo. But then if you look up above the moon, it's also at home in Gemini. And the same thing with Venus, at home in Libra, also in Taurus. And then Mars at home in Scorpio, also in Aries. Jupiter at home in Sagittarius, also in Pisces. And then Saturn at home in both Capricorn and Aquarius. Okay, so now I want to just talk about the nature of planets in their home sign versus, I should have put the word on the screen here, but you'll hear all the time about a planet being in detriment, or sometimes it's called in exile. Yeah, I think those are mostly the two words that you'll hear, detriment or exile. And so what this means, it means it's a planet in the sign opposite to its home. So let's take a look at the sun here in Leo. I wish I had like a little pointer, but it's like bottom left. That's the sun in Leo. So if you go completely across it, you have Saturn and Aquarius. So the sun is opposite to Saturn, and so is the moon. So both of the lights are opposite to Saturn. So what does Saturn come to signify? Darkness. Yes, so the light is opposite the dark. And then let's go to Mercury. So Mercury in Virgo, across it we have Jupiter and Pisces. And then across from Mercury in Gemini, we have Jupiter and Sagittarius. So we have the smallest planet, Mercury, besides the moon, but the smallest planet, Mercury, opposite to the biggest planets, Jupiter, or the biggest planet, Jupiter. So that if the sun and Saturn are light and dark, Mercury versus Jupiter is small things versus big things. And this is very like basic, like it's not very specific, but these are broad. I think broad is the term I'm looking for. Like Mercury doesn't only represent small things in life, and Jupiter doesn't only represent big things, but those are like the sort of like foundational ideas. Because Mercury is smaller, it also represents things that occur faster, like transference of information, whereas Jupiter, it's huge. And so it's more so like bigger things, bigger systems in place, and like bigger aspirations, bigger hope. Okay, and then next off, let's look at Venus. So Venus we have in Libra, across from it we have Mars and Aries, and then over here we have Venus in Taurus across from Mars in Scorpio. So Venus is typically called like the planet of love, and Mars is called the planet of war. So that's their dichotomy. Is that the word? Well, their opposition is love, laughter, joy, pleasure, versus Mars, which is war, aggression, severance, separation. I think that's all of them. Yeah. And so that's sort of why we have this idea of like a planet when it's comfortable in its home versus when it's in the opposite sign, it's not comfortable, because the planet that rules over the sign opposite to it has ideas or beliefs or whatever that are opposite to said planet, right? So because the sun likes light and warmth and optimism and inspiration, it's not comfortable when it's in the sign of Aquarius, a winter sign, a cold sign, a dark sign, a sign where there's limited light, at least in the northern hemisphere. Yes, and the same goes with, let's say, Venus in Scorpio. Venus likes pleasure, it likes joy, it likes laughter, it likes happy things. And when it's in a war zone, it's not comfortable. Same as Mars. Mars, when it likes, aggression, it likes severance, it likes action. It's not comfortable in Taurus or in Libra, where Venus wants to just chill. Mars is like, no. So that's what detriment is. If you ever hear someone say a planet's in detriment or in exile, it's in the sign opposite to its home, and it's just understand that it's not comfortable there because it's in an environment that's completely foreign. Um, yeah, so that's what domicile and detriment is. I should have put detriment on this screen here, but whatever. Anyways, let's move on to the aspects, and this is going to be a little bit um, more information, a lot of information at once, but it's important to understand how aspects work. Yeah, okay. So I kind of wish this um, image that I got from the astrologydictionary.com was, you know, rotated as like the Thema Mundi. And I did rotate it, but then the glyphs were not right side up, so it didn't look right. Um, okay. So you can see red and blue lines here on the screen. So let's go down to the sun in Leo. So as we can see, there's like this long red line going to Saturn and Aquarius. And so this was the opposition that I was talking about. Actually, wait, let me just start at what an aspect is. Okay, so aspect is, it comes from the word that means to see. And so when a planet is able to see another planet, it is able to, interact with that planet. And it has a relationship. And the relationship, the manner of the relationship is dictated by the angle of the aspect. So, like, if we go back to that example of the sun, it's 180 degrees. It's completely opposite in a straight line. Saturn or Aquarius, right? So, those, when let's say you have a planet in Leo and a planet in Aquarius, those planets are opposite to each other. So they have opposing views. And because of that, they think of things in opposite ways. Yeah, so Saturn might say we need to limit, we need to restrict, whereas the sun says no, we need to give it more energy, give it more life. And so that's the nature of an opposition. Okay, so next up, I want to talk about. Okay. So this is kind of confusing. Like, you see how we have aspects coming from both the sun and the moon? That's because, well, what do we need to see? We need light, right? And the sun and the moon are our luminaries. And I like this image of the aspects because it shows that the aspects, when they come from the light givers, the luminaries, the aspect is aspecting the home sign, the domicile of the planet that rules over the nature of the aspect. Okay? So that was really freaking confusing. But so let me talk about Saturn again. Okay, so an opposition is Saturnian in nature. So an opposition is limiting, it's restricting, because when things are at opposite ends, they pull away from each other, right? It's not a harmonious thing. It's they're opposite to each other. And that's because Saturn is opposite the light, right? We need the light to see. So when we're opposing it, it's opposite. It's darkness, right? And so that's what an opposition is. Okay, let's go to another aspect is called a sextile. And so a sextile occurs when a planet is 2 signs away or 60 degrees away from another planet. And so if we look at the sun and the moon, the 2 signs that are 60 degrees away from each of them are the signs ruled by Venus, right? So we have Taurus being sextile Cancer, and then we have Libra being sextile Leo. And because of this, the nature of a sextile is Venusian. So when a planet is 60 degrees away from each other, it has a pleasurable, a helpful relationship with whatever planet it's sextile to. Um, Whereas if we go a little bit further, if we look to Mars, Mars is 90 degrees, 3 signs away from the light bringers, which forms a square. And a square is a harsh relationship. It's a relationship, instead of a helpful or um, supportive relationship, it's a relationship of severance, a relationship of aggression. And so these planets are these, whenever planets are 90 degrees away from each other, they're sort of tearing each other down, right? They're not building each other up. Okay. And so those are our Martian aspects. So sextile is Venusian aspect. Mars, or squares, are Martian aspects. Oppositions are Saturnian. And then lastly, our last aspect that we see on here is our aspects from the lights to Jupiter. And so this is called a trine because it forms like a triangle. There's 3 of them. That's another thing with like the square, it forms a square. Sextile forms a, what's it called? Hexagon? Yes. Okay. So Jupiter, 120 degrees, yeah, away from the light bringers. And so this relationship is also beneficial in the way that Venus was. But it's like more beneficial, right? If opposition is more harsh than a square, because it's Saturnian, which is the greater malefic, versus Mars, the lesser malefic. The trine with Jupiter, or the Jupiterian aspect, the trine, is more beneficial, and the sextile is a little bit less beneficial, but it's still a helpful relationship, but it's not as easy and optimistic and growth, and supportive of growth as a relationship as a trine is. Okay, and so this is kind of a lot. You also notice that Mercury does not aspect the luminaries because it's right next to it. And so there's no mercurial aspect. And that's another thing because Mercury is an outlier. You'll see in a lot of astrology. I think I'm going to make a video on that called Mercury as an Outlier, because Mercury, it's a lot of the time it doesn't fall into one of the categories that astrology establishes. It's not a malefic or a benefic. In fact, it can be both depending on which planet it's most closely aspecting. It's neither masculine nor feminine. Yeah, it's the planet that is retrograde the most often. It's the planet that is, not visible the most often because of its proximity to the sun. Mercury's a fucking outlier, and I'll make a whole video on that. But Mercury does not aspect the lights, and so there is no aspect that is mercurial in nature, because Mercury doesn't really have a nature, and I'll get more into that in the Mercury as an Outlier video. Anyways, so those are the aspects, and the aspects can occur between any planet and any sign. Don't think that because we have like the Sun trine Jupiter over here in Sagittarius that a trine has to occur between Jupiter, or like it has to involve Jupiter. It doesn't. A trine can occur between any planets. Like like Mars in this image right now is trine to the moon. Oh, this is also another thing that's important. Okay. So all planets that are trine to each other have the same element. So if we look at the trine that is happening right now, we have Jupiter, which is trine the sun, and it's also trine Aries. There isn't an aspect line going from the sun to Aries, but we can tell that they are 120 degrees. So all of the fire signs are trine each other, all of the water signs are trine each other, all of the air signs are trine each other, and all of the earth signs are trine each other. So if like you're casually just like thinking about astrology and you think about a sign that has the same element, you're like, oh, these planets are trine each other. That's an easy way to remember. Um, okay, planets that are um, square each other. These planets all have the same, um, what is it called? Um, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the word. Um, well, okay, it's either when a planet is fixed, mutable, or cardinal. What is the word for that? I know it's a triplicity, but whatever. A planet is either at the beginning of a season, in the middle of a season, or at the end of a season. And so it's either cardinal, which is an initiatory, fixed, which stays the same, or mutable, which is double-bodied, two things coexisting at once. And so all of the cardinal signs, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, and Aries, are all square each other. The same with immutable, are all square each other, and the same with fixed signs, are all square each other. Okay, and then lastly, the sextile. The sextile planets are all the same polarity, masculine versus feminine. Um, so yeah, if you look, the Sun, Libra, and then Sagittarius, then Aquarius, Aries, Gemini, those are all masculine signs. And then if you look at the other ones, Cancer, Taurus, Pisces, Capricorn, Scorpio, Virgo, those are all feminine signs. Yeah, so that sort of brings in another aspect, two aspects. Um, the reason those planets are able to communicate and see each other, and the reason that they have those relationships is because of the things they have in common or the things that they have different about them, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, hopefully that was helpful. Um, I know it's a little convoluted, but I don't know. I hope that somebody gets something out of this video. And I think this is going to be the video I'm going to post because I don't feel like doing this again. So sorry if it sucks, but I tried.